Hey, what's up, people? Welcome to the first episode of Programming Afternoon. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a unit test in Python using Visual Studio Code. In the programming, we have a section, it's called testing. In the testing, we break our functions to see, hey, can I trick this function to give me an error? Once we do that, we return to the function and try to fix it and update it to get better. So anyways, without any further ado, let's get into the business. So the first thing we're gonna do is to create a folder. I'm gonna create a folder here. I'm gonna call it testment. You can call it anything you want. And after that, I'm gonna open the Visual Studio Code. So here it is, Visual Studio Code. You can click on Open Folder, or if you doesn't have this, you can go top of the here, click on the file, then you can click on the Open. And after that, you navigate to the testment or the folder you created and select it. So here we are in the testment. I'm gonna create my program file. I'm gonna call it main.py. In the main.py, I'm gonna create a function, and after I created my function, then in the other file, I'm gonna test it out, right? So what is my function? My function called do underline stuff, and in here I'm giving it a number, and inside of my function I would say return number plus 5. Just a simple function, right? So after that, I'm gonna create another file. I'm gonna call it test underline anything. It's important when you create a file in the Visual Studio Code and you want to test it out, it's really important to use a specific naming convention. And soonly I will show you why it's so important. So I suggest you to name your test files just like this, like test underline anything you want, right? Test underline 1, or anything you want, but you have to use test underline, right? So I'm going to use test underline 1.py. I press enter, and here's my test file. So the first thing we're going to do to test our file is to import Unittest. Unittest is a built-in module in the Python library, and you doesn't need to download it because it's built-in, right? It's used to test our functions. And after importing Unittest, I'm gonna import my main file, which this is my main file, right? After that, I'm gonna create a class. I'm gonna call it test main, and in here we inherit from what Unittest gives us. In this case, it's test case, right? So after that, in this section, I'm gonna create a function or method because it's part of a class, and I'm gonna call it test do stuff, and we receive a self, right? And in here I'm gonna test my function, right? So I will give my function a random number. So I'm gonna create a variable. I'm gonna call it test underline parameter or param. I give it 10. And in the next line, I'm gonna say result is going to be equal to my main file dot do stuff. Remember, in the main file, we had a function called do stuff, right? We're gonna test it out. So do stuff should receive a parameter, right? So I'm gonna give it the parameter. This is the parameter that we give it. In the next line, which is the key line in the test section, we use self.assert equal. And in here we should give it two parameters, right? The first parameter is going to be result, and result is what we have here. Remember, we have main from the main file, and we use the do stuff, which is our function, right? And in here we are testing our function. So when we tested out our function, we have the result. So we say result is going to be equal to, I will guess it's going to be 15, right? Because it's 10. We give it a 10. So it's going to be 10. The number going to be 10, right? 10 plus 5 is literally going to be 15. Am I right? If I run the program, nothing is happening, right? But why is that? Because we are not running the unit test, so we write unittest.main. This will run our entire unit test file, but before that, I would say we have to go in the testing section and we should configure something. We click on configure Python file tests. Then after that, we choose Unittest, which is standard for testing in the Python. And we use directory root. And here, we're gonna choose the naming convention that we used for naming our file. You remember that? I told you to name your file test underline anything you want. So this is the way we are chosen to name our file. Test underline anything. You can use test anything, anything underline test, anything test, anything test, anything. I used test underline anything, right? So I click on that. We have to wait a little bit. So as you can see, it gives me error and it doesn't working. And why is that happening? Because in here we say if underline name is equal to underline main, underline, right? And in here, if we do this and save it, then we refresh it, you can see we have our file, right? And now I click on run, and you can see that I'm gonna run my test file from here. I run the file, and as you can see, run one test in 0 seconds, and it's okay. So everything was fine. We tested our file, we tested our function, and it was okay. We give it the parameter, it was 10, and the result was 15, and it was true, right? But I'm gonna create another test. In the new test, I'm gonna give it random piece of string, right? So if we give it a random piece of string, what will be the output? I guess the output will going to be value error, right? So I guess the output is going to be value error. So I'm gonna run the file again, run the test again. As you can see, I have an error here. It's a type error. Can only concatenate str, not int to str. Type error. So the thing is happening in here is our main file is failed. And why is that? Because if we say int number and we check it out again, it's still error, right? But it's not type error anymore. It's not a type error, and it's a value error, right? So what is the next step we have to do to get rid of value error? We have to go to our function, and I would say try. We're going to put it in a try and except block to avoid that showing the value error. So I say accept value error as error, and in here we can do anything we want, but in my case I'm going to return error. So one more time again, I'm going to run the file. As you can see, it's an assertion error, value error, and if I ran this from here, as you can see, it's a assertion here, assertion error, right? It's not a value error anymore. So the thing is happening here is we have assert equal, right? And the problem is this is not a value error. This is a instance. This giving us a instance, right? So we have to do something like this in here. We say is instance, we say is instance. I'm gonna run this again, and as you can see, so the problem in here is the assert equal is going to receive two parameters, right? But we have one parameter here, and it's is instance. Is instance is giving us a true and false, right? So the output from is instance is going to be a true or false. And what can do here is if you open the Python documentation and you will go to the unit test, you can see the list of assert methods. So click on that, and as you can see, we have the complete list of methods that you can use. But what do we need is assert true, right, for here. So I'm gonna say assert true, right? And now one more time, I'm gonna test it out. And as you can see, it's literally working. There is no error anymore. I'm gonna run the file again, and we have a huge problem again because it's telling us ran one test in 0 seconds. And why is that? Because really simple, you have to make it two test do stuff too, because if you put the same name for another function, it will only run one of them, right? So I'm gonna save it and we will test it again. Ran two tests in 0 seconds. So yeah, as you can see, we have two tests completed correctly and we improved our function, right? So next thing I'm gonna explain about the unit test is if we go to creating the file, I'm gonna create another file, I'm gonna test it, I'm gonna file it, I'm gonna name it test2.py. I open this, then again I'm gonna copy this section in here, and once we do this I'm gonna save it, then I will go back to test section, I refresh this, and as you can see we have two files here, two test files, so you can have as much as test files you want. And one another thing I should explain to you is we use if segment. This line of code means that run this file if it's the main file being run. So when you run the other files, the test file wouldn't be run, right? And we do this because we don't want that customers see our test codes, or we don't want to use the test codes in our production codes, right? So here I'm gonna click on the test, and as you can see it's working. So you can have test files as much as you want. So yeah, this is how you create a unit test in Python using vscode. My name is Ari. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or suggestion for the video, please comment down below, and don't forget to like this video, and if you subscribe, there's a huge amount of help you're giving me. So stay awesome as you are.